Hello everyone, this is Eddie here with a tutorial on tuples. If you haven't done so already, please check out the other videos on our YouTube channel and please use those to study for the final exam. They're very helpful. So first of all, in tuples, what you need to know is that a tuple is a data type that can hold any sequence of objects. So if you can see here, you can hold things like ints, floats, lists, tuples. You can hold anything else like dictionaries, other tuples. Pretty much anything that you want in here as long as you designate different elements using a comma. One thing that you need to know about tuples is that they are immutable, meaning that they cannot be changed. So if you have a tuple here defined as a equals this, and over here, if you try to change the 0th index of a to something like 4, it will throw an error because tuples cannot change any element that already exists. However, you can add on to a tuple and reassign the variable to that new tuple, and we will get to that in a little bit. You do need to know that tuples can be indexed in the same way that you index a list. So the order that you see here is the same order. It's not like a dictionary where things get flipped up, but if you have this over here, a equals 1, 2, 3, and you try to find the 0th index of a, that will give you the element 1. Alright, next on the topics list is the operations for a tuple. You see here if you have a equals this, you can do something like length of a. Basically this returns an integer depicting just the number of elements in a, which here would be 3. You can concatenate tuples to other tuples over here. So if you were to add this onto another tuple, 4, 5, 6, you would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a tuple. Keep in mind this is different from changing a tuple. What you can do here is you can in fact just reassign a to this operation here. You're not necessarily changing anything, you're just re-referencing what this variable is talking about. Alright, you can also use multiplication on tuples, which would in this case give you 3 of the same thing. So just like a list, you will have the elements repeated 3 times in order over here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You can also do something like 2 in a, which is checking for the element 2 in the tuple and seeing if it exists, which it does here, so it will return true, as you can see here. Another thing to note is that you can iterate through a tuple, so if you had I in this tuple, and let's say you wanted to print out I, it would do so because it is iterating through the individual elements here. It's very useful. Just like with a list, you can do with a tuple as well. Alright, next let's talk about tuple packing and unpacking. So because you can see here that tuples can hold numerous different elements, what you can do is you can assign different variable names to different elements within a tuple. So if you see here, you have a tuple Eddie in CS. You know that there are 2 elements here. What you can do is you can reassign these to A and B. So let's try this out over here. If you were to see what A equals now, it would give you Eddie, and likewise B would give you CS. And over here, what you can do is you can even change the ordering of the tuple by flipping around the variables. So if you were to do this, now A would give you CS and then B would give you Eddie because over here we just changed the ordering of the variables. Next, we can just talk about some basic types of tuples. So if you see here, A by itself is a empty tuple. Let's try putting this over here in the shell. Alright, if you wanted to check the type that A is, it would give you a tuple. So this over here is a tuple without any elements, which is basically just an empty tuple. Now what is interesting here is if you do put an element into a tuple and check the type of that, it will give you a integer because in this case, if you have a tuple with only 1 element, you would have to designate it with a comma. Otherwise, it would just assume that it is an integer by itself and you're just putting parentheses around it. just in case you want to do an operation or something with it. So keep this in mind, that this would be a tuple, where this by itself without a comma in one element would be a integer, or whatever else that is, this single element. Over here, you would have a tuple with multiple elements. You designate the different elements by commas. Pretty self-explanatory here. If you were to have something like this, where the end element is a comma, it's interesting because if you call this, it would just by default get rid of the comma at the end and give you this thing, which is still a type tuple. All right. Let's move on to this next practice. So we have tuple concatenation and slicing. So as we said before, you can index a tuple in the same way that you do a list, which also means you can slice a tuple according to various indices. So let's go through this practice real quickly. How do we get 1, 2, 4, 5 without making any new variables? Please take a second to just pause the video here and try to figure this out by yourself. All right, so hopefully you figured out that you see here 1, 2 is part of A, the first two elements here, and 4, 5 is the first two elements of B. So what you can do is you can take A, you can slice up until this first index, so you can have the beginning up until, but not including the second index, which will give you 1 and 2. And likewise, you add that to just this tuple sliced here. The first two elements, so same thing over here. Yeah, so if we try this over here, and we try this thing, you will see 1, 2, 4, 5 over here. Awesome. Next, how would you get 6, 5, 3 without making new variables? This question is a little trickier, so just take a second to pause the video and then come back to it. We'll go through it together. All right, so to get 6, 5, 3, you notice here that 6, 5 is essentially B, but backwards, and then including here. So if we did this, B backwards, this is the notation for backwards tuple. So this by itself is 6, 5, 4. Now you want to get the first two elements, so it's just here up until 2. And then you add that to just the last element of A, which is just this over here. If you try this out, oh, my bad. So if you do here, you see that this by itself is flipped here, but we forgot to change this to a tuple. So if you just did this, making this a tuple, then in that case it will give you 6, 5, 3. So just make sure if you have an individual element by itself that you do put it like this, so it would count it as a tuple and not an integer. So over here, it saw it as just 3 by itself, but over here you see 3 as a tuple. So the important thing is you can only add tuples to tuples, and you cannot add things of different values. All right, so next let's do some practice problems. Please just pause the video here, try to solve these, and then we'll go over it together. All right, so first of all here, you see that both of these are singular elements, but without a comma, meaning that they are both integer types. So this would give you 7 by itself. Over here, you see single elements again, but this time this has a comma, meaning this one is a tuple and this one is not. So doing this would give you a error. Here you have two tuple elements together. Adding them will give you another tuple with just the 2 elements, so 3 and 5 here. And then last of all, let's try this. You add these two together and then subtract this element. So it would not give you just 7 by itself, but it would throw an error because the only operational types for a tuple are addition and multiplication. So just keep that in mind. All right, so next we will go through this first tracing problem. Please just take a minute to look over this, and then we will go over the answer in a second. All right, so if you see here, you have a list of tuples, each one with 2 elements, and then a total counter starting off at 0. You see here that you are iterating through each tuple here by 2 elements. However, something very confusing here is that name and entry are switched. So every time it iterates through this, that entry will actually be corresponding to the string element, whereas name will be corresponding to the number. Alright, so first of all, it will look through this first tuple. It will check to see if essentially it is a even number, and if it is, you will be incrementing this divided by 2 to the total, printing even. Otherwise, if it's odd, then you will be adding 3, and then you will be printing odd. So if we have just over here to the side, total equals 0, and then let's say over here is just the shell output. So first element, you see 49 here, which is an odd number. You will be incrementing 3 to the total over here. Then you will be printing out odd to the shell. All right. Next, you have Jack and 52. You're checking to see if 52 is even, which it is. You'll be incrementing whatever it is divided by 2, so 26. 26 plus 3 is 29. Then you will be printing out even. All right, go on to 10, see it's even, add the half of that, which is 5. You get 5 plus 29, which is 34. And printing out even once again. And then last of all, you have 74, which is even, so you'll be adding half of that, which is 37. 37 plus 34 gives you 71. And then printing out even once again. So after you print out these 4 lines over here, you print out the total amount, which is 71. And these 5 lines will be your answer. All right. Next we have here, we'll just have more space for the output here. You see this complicated dictionary, you see this list, and then the total here. Just trace through this, and then we will come through in a second. All right, so now you see that you are iterating through a list, which has a bunch of tuples, and you are comparing to see just the corresponding tuple key within the dictionary, and then finding the 0th element of the value, then adding that to the total. So let's go over this first. Cool. So the first is this. You find the corresponding key here, find the value, increment 1. Next one, 1, 1, 0, 0, you will be adding 0, which does nothing. Same with this one. 0, 0 has this, check the 0th index, incremented by 1 again. And then for this one, check this, 0th index is 1 of the value, and then increment it again to get 3. So this will print 3 in the shell. Pretty easy. All right, last of all, we have a coding problem over here. So just take a moment to read through this, code it out by yourself, and then we will go over this in a second. All right, so a function called makeRanks that takes in a string returns a tuple. Just keep all of these in mind. Make sure that you look at this formatting and then return something like this. So the answer of this is, let me just pull up the code here. All right, so you have your function name over here with your parameter a string. You have your tuple over here that you will eventually be returning here. First of all, you just want to split the entire string over here by a delimiter of a comma, which will get you 3 different values of here, here, and here. And now all you want to do is get these elements by themselves while taking out all the extra stuff that you don't need. So iterating through the indices here, you want to concatenate this tuple here to the original. So what we are doing here, we are finding the corresponding value of this. So I'll type this out actually. the list will, after splitting, will become this. Oops. All right, so if you notice here, it splits it a little weirdly, starting with the second and third elements, but that's okay. What we will do is we will first just start with the third index and then go straight to the end. So that'd be here, here, and here. So what this does, this gets rid of all the number and the periods here. But if you notice with these last two elements that there is a space left, so what we do, we just strip it just in case to get rid of all the white space around it, add it to the tuple, and then return it here, and this will get you the answer. All right, hopefully you were able to get through all of that. Tuples are very important. Just keep in mind all of the basic concepts we talked about here, and you'll be good for tuples on the final exam. All right, thank you for watching, and good luck on the final.